Hello and welcome to the Get French Football News preview show. I'm your stand-in host, Adam White, this Thursday evening, replacing Eric Devin, who's away for the week. In Eric's absence, joining me in looking ahead to the second round of action in Ligue this weekend is Nathan Staples. Hi, Nathan.
Hi, Adam.
And Peter Rutzler. Hi, Peter. Before we talk over our feature matches, there's just time for a brief catch-up on the first round of Coupe de la Ligue action, which got underway this midweek. No Ligue sides just yet, but some interesting results nonetheless. Relegated Lorient only edged past national side Laval on penalties. Le Havre and Nimes shared 8 goals before Le Havre won it on penalties as well. There were 5 shootouts in total from 12 games, one of which saw the other national side, Red Star, progress at the expense of Auxerre. Tours smashed Niort 4-1, while there were wins for Reims, Lens and Valenciennes. 2. Lorient versus Lens is perhaps the tie of the second round later in the month before the non-European Ligue sides are added in round 3. So moving on to our previews for this week, we're going to be looking at 4 matches in total with the chaps, talking over the action and exciting opening round last week. So our first match to preview ahead of a rather interestingly sort of planned weekend, 2 games on Friday night as Nice have their Champions League game next week. So our first match is Nice as they take on Troyes tomorrow night at 6 p.m. So Nathan, I was looking it was interesting to get your thoughts on this. So they've made an interesting signing this week in Wesley Sneijder, who at 33 is perhaps, some say maybe a little bit past it, but an interesting one, an interesting addition to the league nonetheless. Where do you see him fitting into this Nice team, and how can they accommodate him? And more to the point, is this actually a good idea, despite it being something of a headline move? Can he improve the team?
I quite like the move. I know a lot of people think the Dutch maestro is maybe past his best, in all honesty, but I've always been quite a big fan of Wesley Sneijder ever since there were several times he was linked to Manchester United while still at Inter Milan, although that never really came to fruition. But he's a great creator, and he always has been. And that's maybe something Nice have missed since Yunus Belhanda left, obviously going back on loan, and now he's gone to Turkey. I think you probably slot him into that slot there where Belhanda was, maybe as a secondary striker behind Alisson Player or Balotelli. Maybe if they go for more of what they have done recently, of a 4-3-3, he maybe plays as the more attacking midfielder in that midfield 3, alongside maybe Koziello and Seri, should Seri stay. But I quite like it. At 33, his legs might be going, but I don't think you ever lose that nous and that brain that a player like Sneijder has. The ability to play the ball, the ability to find those gaps between the lines and find the right space in behind for the strikers, I think is a great addition to not only that, but his Champions League pedigree, his experience both at that level and even World Cup level as well is vast compared to a lot of players in any league, really. So getting someone like that in, combining it with someone like Favre, who's great at getting the most out of every player. And I really quite like it. Like I say, it gives them maybe a bit more tactical flexibility now. It gives them a couple more options. They've also brought in Saint-Maximin as well this week, which was a terrific signing. They really needed extra width. At least Malou has been awful. He's clearly a substitute option, and with Esseric going as well, they did need more options in these areas. And I think Sneijder, I think Saint-Maximin, I think they might not be quite finished yet. They might look at a couple more signings through the door, but I like how they're slowly building this squad as a bit more rounded than it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I would agree there, definitely. I think Sneijder is a good addition to the league, and even at 33, has to be considered an upgrade on Belhanda going forward. But interesting to see how he gets. So I don't think he'll play tomorrow, but interesting to see how he gets on overall. Absolutely. So looking at their opponents, then Troyes. So over to you, Peter. So they got off to a good start last week, Troyes, with a draw against Rennes. But they started pretty well last time they got promoted as well. How does this team go about staying up? And do you really think they have a realistic chance of doing so? Mm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there are quite a few teams in that bottom third that all look like they could get relegated, but there's sort of 6 or 7 of them, and they can't all go down. And Troyes, I sort of have a funny thing about Troyes this time, just because last time they weren't able to sign any players because of sort of financial restrictions, and they've signed a few interesting ones, and they've got, like you said, Nian up front who might score some goals when they really struggled for goals last time with just Corentin Jean as the only striker last time around. So hopefully they'll definitely improve on their last Ligue 1 outing. So predictions for this game then, chaps. Nathan, what do you think the score will be?
I agree with the moment that Troyes might be better this time around, and I think they've probably got this game exactly where they want it, really. Nice, with having that Champions League game in midweek, their eyes are really going to be on that because it's going to be a really tough ask against Napoli. Incredibly tough task. So I'm going 1-1 draw.
Interesting. Peter? Yeah, I would agree. I'd say maybe 3-1 to Nice, but I think Troyes put up a fight. An interesting one nonetheless. Okay, moving on to our second game, which is Rennes against Lyon, which follows that Troyes against Nice game on Friday night. So Nathan, Lyon made a strong start in sweeping aside Strasbourg last week, although there's a little bit of nuances there, and Strasbourg did play a lot better towards the end and sort of in the second half. Was this a show of strength from OL or just a relatively poor Strasbourg team? Also, if Lyon are to make a real challenge for the Champions League places this year, is this the type of game against Rennes coming up this weekend where they need to be taking 3 points? And if they are to achieve this aim, who would you see as their pivotal players in this sort of new look Lyon team? And who would they rely on going forward?
I'll start with the initial one, whether it was a show of strength or a poor Strasbourg team. I think it was maybe a little bit of a mix of the two. I'm a little bit less hyped up than a lot of people seem to be about this Lyon team that did reasonably well in this 4-0 win. But Mariano Diaz's first goal is suspect for the goalkeeper. Does it take a minor deflection because it's really close to him? It does seem like a goalkeeping mistake, the first one. His second goal as well is just an abysmal defensive moment where they kick it at each other and he manages to run through and score neatly. So I'm not completely convinced that Lyon were really amazing, like it seems like a lot of Twitter seem to blow up with. And it's a mixture of that Strasbourg team maybe having a little bit of an experience, getting a little bit tired at times, conceding that second goal that probably really killed the game off. If they want to challenge for the Champions League places, they absolutely have to beat a team like Rennes. There's no doubt about it. Rennes have made some really interesting signings this summer. It didn't quite click in that game against Troyes last week, but I still think that they've got plenty of talent in their squad. I don't really like them playing Sarr up front. I don't think he's a central striker. I think you should really play him on the left wing and allow him to express himself like a lot of these young players that they play, Dembele and I'm thinking of Mbappe as well, who are excellent on that left-hand side. Allow them to express themselves there. It's a little bit easier for those younger players to find space. He really struggled in the middle and he really should have scored right near the end as well. So they need to take 3 points from a team like this that might be challenging them if they aren't in those Champions League places for a Europa League place. So it's maybe even doubly important that they get a victory here against a side that might be troubling other teams around them, at least this season. If they are to get there, it's probably going to lean on the spine of many teams, and that would go through Diakabe, who's an excellent young centre-back. I really, really like him. I think him and the new man, is it Douglas? Is it the centre back next to him now? Is it or
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I like that pairing. I think they did reasonably well in that game, and I think the two together fit nicely. I was a bit disappointed that Mamana went, but Diakabe is the more important one, certainly, and he's the future of that Lyon side. Then you look slightly further forward. Lucas Toussaint is very important now. Now Gonalon's gone. Now Toliso's gone. He will really be a leader in that middle of the park. He needs to be that shield in front of those centre backs and perform there. And then it all leans on that captain there, Nabil Fekir, that I don't want to get my hopes up again in thinking that this was maybe the renaissance moment at the weekend. It felt like it might have been at times last season. There were little glimpses when you went, oh, he scored a goal and made an assist and he's had a fantastic game. Maybe this is the moment, and he didn't quite kick on. Does the combination of him now being captain, being the talisman of this side, being the senior figure of every one of the attacking trio of Depay and Traore and Diaz as well, surely he's the one that they're all looking on to rediscover that unbelievable form he had about 2 years ago before that knee injury. If he can return to that, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that I think that Lyon will finish third and get Champions League place. If they have someone with that quality in their side, that's something that's missing from the likes of Marseille, maybe a Lille, maybe Bordeaux and Rennes, depending on how their seasons go. I don't think any of those sides have someone of the calibre of Fekir at his best. If he can manage to get there, he might single-handedly push them towards that Champions League place.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think anybody who watches Ligue and has done for a while would love to see Nabil Fekir back at his best. And I definitely agree that if they can somehow manage to, or Ginesta can manage to sort of cajole those sort of performances out of him again, then yeah, that you could see Lyon in the top three quite comfortably. But it's just a big if, isn't it? But hopefully he'll rediscover that form. So moving on to Rennes then, Peter. So they made what they would see perhaps as a poor start last weekend in drawing at promoted Troyes, looking a bit blunt in forward areas, as Nathan mentioned. So where are the goals going to come from in this team? Was my main question to you. They had 19-year-old Ismail Sarr up front, as Nathan said, and is he really the man to rely on to score them the goals? And if not, who do they need to be looking at to bring in to really get that sort of 10, 15 goals a season to really push for the top six? It does it. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. That's wonderful. Mm.
Yeah,
Indeed.
I just want to
Go on,
jump
go,
in
Nathan. Go.
and mention that I think they missed out on Dione, really. I think Saint-Etienne really stole him out of underneath plenty of noses. I'd like to see them start Jordan Tell in this game. He got the goal at the weekend. He looked reasonably good when he came on. He certainly added a bit more verve to their striking force. They've got a really good base for a really strong team here. You look at Nagnon, you look at Ben Sebaini, although he's a little bit rash at times, he could be really good. Benjamin Andre is a very good player. And then you add the signings like Saar and Mawassa. I really like Mawassa, although he's very raw. I think they've got a really interesting squad. 1 or 2 players here, and looking at the teams around them, they could have a real chance of European football if they manage to gel it together.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, what was key is that central striker role, isn't it? Like, obviously losing CEO wasn't seen as a big miss, but he does offer some sort of, obviously not at all, but he does offer a focal point to that team, and I think that's kind of what they're missing. And they've got a lot of attacking players, but no sort of strikers, no presence in sort of in and around the 6-yard area or in around the 18-yard area. So they kind of need to bring in a genuine striker rather than sort of playing wingers or attacking midfielders in attacking positions up front. So for me, I think if they do get that 30 million, they should really go for. It's a shame that they missed out on Dione, but they need to be thinking as an out-and-out striker to play with or sort of inside of Saar. So be interesting to see how that progresses. So an interesting game, as the chaps have mentioned there, tomorrow night. So Peter, your prediction for Rennes against Lyon at 7:45 tomorrow? Interesting. I'm going to go 1 each as well. Nathan.
I'm going to go for maybe a surprising one, given what I've said, and I'm going to go 2-0 Lyon. I think it might even put a lot of pressure on Christian Gorka for a result like that. It might force his hand to spend a little bit more, if any more money comes through.
Indeed, an interesting one nonetheless. So moving on to our third game that we'll be previewing this evening, and that's Nantes against Marseille, which will be kicking off in the afternoon slot on Saturday. So Nathan, Nantes were outplayed to some extent by an admittedly impressive-looking Lille last week, but the fight from Conceição's spell, even only after one game, so we need to give Ranieri a little bit of time here. But it seems to have dissipated a little bit already. What does Ranieri have to do to keep this Nantes side competitive and keep that fight that Conceição sort of extricated so wonderfully from the Nantes for a very similar Nantes squad? So do they need to be looking at signings? Do they need to change formation, change anything tactically? Keeping Guillaume Gillet is obviously a big must as well. I have a horrible feeling as well. I don't like to say this, but I have a horrible feeling about Ranieri this year, that it may be one of his sort of a very up and down career. It may be sort of one of his failures, and he may. I hope not, but he may not last the year. Nathan, what do you think?
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it might slip through your net. But earlier this week, Guillaume Gillet ended up joining Olympiacos as he asked to before the game at the weekend, which is, like we mentioned in the preview show. I remember you mentioning, Adam, that's a massive blow. He's really integral to that midfield, and people don't notice it when he's not gone because they're focusing on players like Rongier and Harita with the young, exciting players around him that he really melded them together, being that block, occasionally being that creative force when they needed it. He's such a Swiss Army knife that you really miss him sometimes, and I think they're going to miss him massively. Even though he is 33, I think he's a real big loss. And falling out with Ranieri's not the greatest start to his reign either. And like you say, I have a fear that it might be one of those shorter Ranieri reigns we tend to see. He's inheriting, in all honesty, a not that great a squad. Conceição squeezed absolutely every single morsel out of this team last season. Somehow, you look at players like Emiliano Sala. You look at I'm trying to remember the forward that scored the load of goals. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, produced Nakuma. Yes, he seemed to all of a sudden come to a spark when he never really did it anywhere else. They just seem to solidify as well, and they seem to have a bit more strength about them. And Rongier finally come back in. Pardo had a good last half of the season, although he's obviously not there anymore. They need something, I think, in all honesty. I'm still a little bit disappointed of how much they got for Harit. I think they maybe could have squeezed a little bit more out of a maybe bigger team if they tried harder. But there is quality there at the same time. You look at the likes of Leo Dubois, who's a good fullback. I think Nicolas Pauwara is a mixed signing because he gives away the penalty at the weekend again, because that's one of the least surprising things you'll ever see, I think, is Nicolas Pauwara being caused into trouble. Again, we always mention these interesting midfielders they've got of Thomason, and although he's not last season with Kacaniklic, Iloki, they never seem to progress to the level that we're expecting them to. I thought Valentin Rongier was the only exception to really say that he did something in that game against Lille. He was maybe a little bit unlucky with the little dink after the 1-2 with Salah. He almost scored. I think he's the only one who can really say that he gave something in that game. But it's just a blatantly mid-table squad that maybe we had a little bit too much expectations on, given how much Conceição transformed them. But I think they're going to not do so great. I don't know where they can bring players in. They're going to have a hard time of it now. The season's started as well, to integrate them. They're not going to be relegation candidates, I don't think. I don't think we're going to see that awful sort of dip they had with René Girard the last season, but they're not a great squad, really. Not as much as other teams around them, above them in that Ligue table from last season have improved, and those are just below them as well. They just don't have enough about them. They just still don't really have any goals up front. I don't think anyone would say that strike force is going to get you 20 goals a season, really. And then you start looking backwards. They've not got a great goalkeeper, though they played Dupé over Tatarusanu, but Dupé's made a couple of mistakes last season. He's made 1 or 2 in that game against Lille as well. I don't think he was that great. It's just not that good of a team. Maybe Ranieri's fallen into a trap here.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, it's definitely an unfortunate situation. You're right. It had completely slipped through my net about Gilles leaving. That's an unbelievably big miss for them. I mean, the difference between having him in your sort of holding midfield role as opposed to Abdoulaye Touré, is such a big difference. And he's such a leader for that team, and being such a young side, and with all his experience in Belgium and obviously in Ligue and for the Belgian national side. He's going to be very, very difficult for a club like Nantes to replace. But hopefully Ranieri can attract someone in, and who would be able to replace him in terms of stature as well as ability. So sad times for Nantes, but hopefully they can rectify it. And I really hope Ranieri does pull it around. It'd be terrible to see him, fall out before the end of the season. But
I think
an interesting one. Yeah, interesting. I'm still behind him for now. He's only one game so far. So, Peter, moving on to Nantes' opponent, which is Marseille. The first 11 is looking pretty settled as it is. But is it good enough to achieve what are relatively lofty aims at Marseille? Where do you think they need to strengthen, and who with? Plus, is Jordan Amavi a worthwhile signing, and what does this say about Patrice Evra's future? Interesting. Mm. Indeed, it'd be interesting to see how they progress with Amavi and Everton, who will sort of be starting at left back. I've always thought that Patrice Evra could be an option at centre back, but obviously they're already really slow at centre back, so that might not be the best idea. But there is that sort of option that he might suit, especially in this league. Position might suit him alongside a quicker player. But obviously, that with Rolando and Adorami, they're pretty sort of well stocked in terms of players they see as like sort of playing relatively regularly. So it'll be interesting to see how that team pans out. So predictions for this one, then gentlemen, I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. Nathan, what do you think?
I'm going to go with 3-0 Marseille.
Oh. Peter? Indeed, it's going to be an interesting one. Okay, moving on to our final game of our Thursday show, which is Sunday night's sort of primetime game between Guingamp and PSG. So I'm just going to ask one question to you both and sort of get your responses on this. So it looks like this will be Neymar's Paris Saint-Germain debut. It's going to be an exciting occasion, whatever the result, whatever happens. It's great to see him in the league. So what I'd like to know is, should Neymar make his debut this week at Guingamp? If you were Unai Emery, how do you set up this PSG team with Neymar in it? What is your first 11? And does this change depending on whether you're playing in the Champions League and Ligue? Nathan, I'll come to you first.
Well, I'm known for being a little bit crazy, I suppose. So we'll start with what I would do as my first 11. I think the goalkeeper, and we'll leave the goalkeeper in the defence. I think that relatively picks itself. I obviously have Dani Alves coming in. I'd probably have Areola over Trapp. The rest of them probably pick themselves. My midfield, I'll probably play a 4-2-3-1, where my midfield would have a bit risky, but I would play Verratti and Rabiot. I'm always been the biggest critic of Thiago Motta. He's not getting any younger. He's not getting any less rash in a point. And I think you could probably mould Verratti and Rabiot to do enough between them in a role like that to sort of make do without him now. That would mean saying they were fit. I don't think all of them are fit or available for the weekend, but I would have Draxler as the number 10. That's more of his natural role anyway. He played his best football at Schalke there. I know he played further wide for Wolfsburg and has since he's joined PSG, but I prefer him there, really. He's a much better player in that area. And then it would be Di Maria on the right cutting in. It would be Neymar where he likes to be in that left cutting in from there, unless he prefers the opposite flank, which your choice is for the Brazilian, really. You play where you want. Yeah. And Cavani up top. I think especially in Liga, that's too lethal for too many teams. I think that's going to create so many goals. It doesn't really matter how many PSG concede. They're just going to outscore everyone else. And it'll be really great for at least us spectators, because there's not going to be a team, even if you play 11 men behind the ball, that kind of firepower, that creativity where Neymar will cut in between the lines, Draxler can cut in between the lines, Di Maria as well, spinning off Cavani, they'll score goals for fun. In the Champions League, you probably would switch it, maybe bring off Draxler, maybe put on a Thiago Motta and hold a little bit better. So it's more of a 4-3-3. But I think in Liga, let's get exciting now, PSG. You were at times really dull. So let's get creative. Let's get a little bit crazy and play three of those attacking players in that team along with Cavani.
Indeed, that's a very gung-ho approach. I like it. With speaking my kind of footballing language there, Nathan. Peter, how about you? Yeah, I definitely agree with that last point. Especially, I think they will go 4-3 in the Champions League at least, and I can even see if I can generally see Emery being quite pragmatic in the Champions League. He often played Blaise Matuidi on the left wing in the Champions League last year. I can honestly see them playing with Neymar and Dani Alves. With Blaise Matuidi and Dani Alves as wingers. If Matuidi were to stay in the Champions League for a big game and Neymar inside. But for me, I love Pastore. I'd love to see Pastore play every game and be first choice. And I'd keep the 4-3 of Rabiot and Verratti, much as saying that as Nathan would, and drop Pastore into that midfield too, with Neymar on the left and Di Maria on the right behind Cavani. I think it's going to be great fun to watch, whatever the circumstances.
I think just very quickly on my part,
go for it.
There's absolutely no way in my mind that they're not going to give Draxler 30 games a season from signing him for that amount of money. I think that's probably why they might lean for the 4-2-3-1. I would love to see Pastore in it. Lucas should go. I think Pastore should maybe even look for the door, really, because they're not going to get the amount of games they really want and should get, at least anyway. So if I'm them two, you could probably still get a tidy fee for both of them as well. Run for the door, boys.
Yeah, I can kind of see that point of view as well. When you think about it, how much depth they've got in those attacking areas, and you briefly mentioned Lucas there. And they've also got Gonzalo Guedes, and I know that Hesse probably won't stay, but all of those players they sort of spent 20, 25, 30 million on. They've got sort of 6 or 7 of them. It's crazy the depth they've got, and I imagine quite a few will leave. But as it stands, they're overstacked in that kind of area of the team. But it's a fun problem to have for Emery.
Yeah, nice to be owned by a country. That's maybe what it gets you nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, indeed. So predictions for this game then, chaps. Peter, I'll come to you first. Indeed, interesting. Nathan.
I quite liked Guingamp last week. I think Marcus Coco played better, and Ludovic Blah were both much better than we saw them at any time last season. I thought they really contributed a lot more than much of what we expected last campaign, when they really, especially in the second half, faded quite a bit. And they're an interesting side. And correct me if I'm wrong, Guingamp beat Paris Saint-Germain at their ground last season, I believe, at the
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So 5-1 PSG.
I'm gonna be a little bit more conservative and say 2-1 PSG, but I think the Guingamp are quite good at home, and as you said, they played really well against PSG and winning against them at home last season. So I think this isn't going to be the walkover necessarily that people think, but an interesting game to finish the weekend nonetheless, and finish this podcast. So fantastic stuff, chaps. Thank you very much for joining me. That's about all we've got time for this week. Be sure to follow Get French Football News on Twitter at GFFN for all your latest transfer updates and latest news from Ligue and the world of French football. So Nathan and Co will be back on Monday with the GFFN show. Is that right, Nathan?
Yes, it will be Monday this week.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, so my thanks to Nathan. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to Peter. And it's goodbye from all three of us. Have a good weekend and enjoy the football.